It all began with a simple plan: a week of solitude, away from the noise of the city, the constant hum of traffic, and the endless ping of notifications. I'd been burned out for months, working double shifts, barely sleeping, barely living. So when I saw the ad for a peaceful remote cabin in the Appalachian Mountains, it felt like an answer. The picture showed a wooden cabin surrounded by misty pines, a narrow dirt trail leading to a small lake, and a promise of tranquility. The host's name was Martha. She sounded kind over the phone, though her tone was oddly measured, almost rehearsed. "It's quiet here," she said. "The mountains protect us from everything, except what lives among them." She gave a short, awkward laugh after that, and I assumed she was joking. I left early on a Friday morning. The drive took longer than I expected, over 6 hours, most of it through twisting forest roads that felt older than the world itself. The deeper I went, the more isolated it became. My cell signal dropped somewhere around noon, and I didn't see another car after that. Just trees, endless and dark, pressing in on both sides. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was dipping behind the ridgeline. The structure stood alone at the end of a narrow gravel path, surrounded by tall pine trees that creaked with every breath of wind. It looked just like the photos, small, rustic, with smoke rising faintly from the stone chimney. A wooden sign beside the front door read, in hand-carved letters, "Whispering Pines." When I stepped out of the car, the first thing that hit me was the silence. Not just quiet, but a total absence of sound. No birds, no insects, just the soft rustle of the trees and the faint hiss of the wind. It made me uneasy. The key was waiting in a metal box by the door, just as Martha had promised. Inside, the cabin was cozy: wooden floors, a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and a single bedroom. Everything smelled faintly of pine and smoke. There was an old radio on the shelf, a few books, and a handwritten note on the kitchen table. The note read, "Welcome to Whispering Pines. Please read and follow the house rules carefully. They're for your safety." Beneath it was a sheet of lined paper with 7 neatly written rules. 1. Do not leave the cabin after sunset. 2. Keep all windows locked, even during the day. 3. If you hear knocking on the door after dark, do not open it, no matter what it says. 4. Do not look directly at the lake after midnight. 5. The forest will whisper your name. Ignore it. 6. If you find the candle by the window lit in the morning, blow it out immediately. 7. Leave before the 7th day. No exceptions. I remember laughing when I read them. It sounded like something straight out of a horror movie. Maybe Martha liked to spook her guests a little. It was a cabin in the woods, after all. But even so, something about the handwriting unsettled me. It was perfectly neat, almost too neat, as if written by someone who had copied the same words many times before. I set the rules aside and unpacked. The rest of the evening went smoothly. I made dinner, lit a fire, and sat by the window watching the fading light filter through the trees. The forest outside looked peaceful, almost serene. By the time the sun fully disappeared, I was exhausted. I turned off the lights and went to bed, telling myself I'd wake up early and explore the trails. Sometime around midnight, I woke up to a sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was just the wind against the shutters, but the sound continued, steady, deliberate. It was coming from the front door. Half asleep, I got up and walked through the cabin, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet. The tapping grew louder. Then it stopped. Silence. I reached for the door handle but froze when I remembered the note. If you hear knocking on the door after dark, do not open it, no matter what it says. That stupid rule flashed through my mind, and suddenly, I didn't feel so amused anymore. I stepped back, my hand trembling slightly. Then, from the other side of the door came a voice. "Hello?" It was soft, almost childlike. "Please, I'm lost." I felt every muscle in my body tense. It spoke again, a little louder this time. "Please, can you open the door? I need help." My heart was racing now. The nearest town was miles away. There shouldn't have been anyone out here. I glanced toward the window but couldn't see much outside. The darkness was too thick, swallowing the trees. I tried to tell myself it was some hiker, maybe someone who'd lost their way, but the longer I stood there, the more wrong it felt. The voice didn't sound scared or cold. It sounded flat, empty, like someone pretending to be human. I backed away slowly, returning to the bedroom. The tapping resumed, faint at first, then sharp, impatient. After what felt like forever, it stopped. I waited in the darkness, barely breathing, until sleep finally dragged me under. When I woke the next morning, the world outside looked harmless again. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, the forest alive with birdsong. For a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a dream. Then I saw the footprints. They were small, barefoot, and led from the edge of the forest to my front door. The prints were dark, as if wet, but the ground around them was dry. I crouched to get a better look, and that's when I noticed something even stranger. The footprints didn't lead away. Whoever, or whatever it was, had come up to the door, but never left. I felt a chill creep down my spine. I went back inside and looked at the list of rules again. They seemed less silly now, almost like a warning. I decided to call Martha, but of course, there was no cell signal. I tried the old radio, fiddling with the dials until static filled the air. For a brief second, I thought I heard something, a voice between the static, but it vanished before I could make sense of it. The rest of the day, I tried to distract myself. I hiked a little, stayed close to the cabin, and even sat by the lake for a while. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror, but there was something about it that felt wrong. I could have sworn the reflection rippled, even when the air was still. That night, I made sure every door and window was locked. I kept the flashlight close to my bed. I didn't want to admit it, but I was scared. Around 2 a.m., I woke again. Not from a sound, but from a whisper. It came from outside, soft and low, like wind through the trees. Only this wasn't the wind. It was saying my name. Slowly, drawn by something I can't explain, I got out of bed and walked to the window. The forest was completely dark, except for a faint light flickering near the tree line, like a lantern moving between the pines. The whisper came again, clearer this time. Daniel, I froze. My name. It was using my name. I wanted to look outside, to see who or what it was, but the note's fifth rule echoed in my head. The forest will whisper your name. Ignore it. I backed away from the window, shut the curtains tight, and tried not to listen. But the whispering didn't stop. It circled the cabin, slow and deliberate, calling my name over and over again. When I finally dared to open my eyes again, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a small candle sitting on the windowsill by the front door. I didn't remember lighting it. Its flame flickered gently, even though the air was still. And that's when I realized it was morning. The sun had already begun to rise, and the candle was still burning. The sixth rule came back to me instantly. If you find the candle by the window lit in the morning, blow it out immediately. My hands were shaking as I reached for it, my breath quick and shallow. But before I could touch it, I noticed something carved faintly into the wooden frame of the window. Letters, rough and uneven, as if scratched there with a nail. They spelled out one sentence, "Don't blow it out." And then somewhere deep in the forest, the whispering started again. For a long moment, I stood frozen, staring at those words scratched into the wood. Don't blow it out. My breath came out uneven, the early morning light casting long shadows across the cabin walls. The candle flickered softly, its flame steady and bright, despite the faint draft sneaking through the cracks in the wood. Every instinct in me screamed to follow the rule. Blow it out, just as the note said. But something about that message carved beside it made my hand tremble. I didn't know who had written it or when, but the letters looked old. The wood around them darkened with time. I finally decided to do neither. I didn't blow it out, but I didn't let it burn unattended either. I just sat there, staring at it, waiting for something to happen. After a few tense minutes, the flame flickered once, then died on its own. A thin wisp of smoke rose and disappeared into the air. I didn't know what that meant. Relief? Warning? Maybe both. I made coffee after that, needing something normal to do. The cabin felt smaller in the daylight, as if the walls had shifted overnight. The silence that had once seemed peaceful now pressed against me. I tried to convince myself that the strange noises, the whispers, even the footprints, all of it had some rational explanation. Maybe there was a prankster nearby, or an animal scratching around at night, but the unease clung to me like mist. Around noon, I decided to explore. I followed the narrow dirt path that wound behind the cabin, leading toward the lake. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. The trees seemed to lean inward as I walked, their shadows stretching across the path like fingers. When I reached the lake, I stopped short. It was beautiful, still perfectly reflective, like a sheet of black glass. The surface mirrored the trees, the clouds, even me standing at the edge. But something was off about the reflection. When I leaned closer, my reflection leaned slower. I blinked, my heart skipped. Then my reflection smiled, but I didn't. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a root. The water rippled, breaking the image apart, but the smile, that faint, unnatural curve, burned in my mind. I turned and hurried back toward the cabin, refusing to look back. When I got there, I noticed something strange. The front door was open. I was sure I had locked it. I always locked it. My pulse quickened as I stepped inside. Everything looked the same. The firewood stacked neatly, the blanket folded on the chair, except for one thing. The paper with the 7 rules was gone. I searched everywhere, under the table, behind the couch, even in the kitchen drawers, but it had vanished. My stomach twisted. Without those rules, I suddenly felt exposed, like I'd lost the only thing protecting me. Then I heard something move upstairs. At first, it was just a faint creak, like someone walking slowly across the floorboards. I didn't even remember seeing a staircase before. My eyes scanned the room and found a narrow wooden ladder tucked behind a curtain near the corner, leading up to a small attic hatch. The noise came again, a slow, dragging step. I stared at the ladder for a long time, debating whether to call out or run. Finally, I whispered, "Hello?" Silence. Then the faint sound of something, or someone, breathing. I grabbed the flashlight and climbed halfway up the ladder, just enough to peek into the attic. It was dark and smelled of dust and decay. I shined the light around, nothing but old boxes and cobwebs, and then the beam landed on something in the far corner. A small wooden box, carved with the same handwriting as the rules. I climbed the rest of the way and crawled toward it. The box was old, its hinges rusted, the lid marked with faint scratches. When I opened it, I found a bundle of folded papers inside. My heart pounded as I unfolded the first one. It was another list of rules, almost identical, but not quite. The handwriting was shakier, more desperate. 1. Do not stay after sundown. They watch from the lake. 2. If the candle goes out on its own, it's already too late. 3. Do not answer the voice that calls your name. 4. The forest takes those who listen. 5. If you see yourself in the water, do not move. 6. Burn the cabin before the 7th night. 7. Pray it doesn't find you first. My hands went cold. These weren't just safety tips. They were desperate ones. The ink on the last line had bled, as if written by someone shaking uncontrollably. Then I noticed something else beneath the papers, a photograph. It showed a man standing in front of the same cabin, smiling stiffly. He looked ordinary, jeans, flannel shirt, hands tucked into his pockets. But his eyes, they were empty. The back of the photo had a date written on it, June 12, 1998. Below the date was a single word, missing. My hands trembled as I put the photo down. I climbed down the ladder, every step creaking under my weight. The air inside the cabin felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves were listening. By late afternoon, the sky had turned gray. A storm was rolling in, thunder rumbling in the distance. I closed the shutters and lit the fireplace, trying to push away the unease gnawing at me. As night fell, the rain started, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the roof. The wind howled through the pines. I sat by the fire, gripping my flashlight, waiting for something I couldn't name. Around midnight, I heard it again, the knocking. 3 sharp knocks on the door. I froze. The sound was unmistakable, the same rhythm as before. Tap, tap, tap. My throat went dry. I didn't move. Then came the voice. "Daniel," it whispered, softer than the rain. "It's me. Please open the door," was my sister's voice. I felt my heart twist. My sister Claire had died 3 years ago in a car accident. But that voice, that tone, was hers exactly. "I need your help," it said again, almost pleading. "You have to let me in." Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. My mind screamed that it wasn't real, that this thing outside wasn't her. But hearing her voice, hearing it beg, broke something inside me. I stood, shaking, and took 1 step toward the door. Then I heard the scratching, slow, deliberate, right against the wood. It wasn't fingernails, it was claws. "Please, Daniel," the voice said again, still using her tone. "It's cold out here." I looked at the door handle. It turned slightly, just enough to creak. That was all I needed to see. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the chair, and ran to the bedroom. I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it. The knocking continued for a while, soft, rhythmic, until it stopped. Then silence. The storm raged outside for hours. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at the flickering shadows, waiting for the sun. When dawn finally broke, I stepped out of the room, my body sore and my eyes burning. The cabin looked different again. There was water on the floor, dark, muddy footprints leading the front door to the table, and then stopping near the window where the candle had been. I followed them slowly, dread building with each step. On the glass, faint but clear, were words traced in condensation. "You almost let me in?" I stumbled back, nearly knocking over a chair. My heart raced, my stomach turning cold. Outside, the forest was quiet again, calm, even peaceful, but I could feel something watching from between the trees. That afternoon, I packed my things. I didn't care how early it was or how far the nearest town might be. I was leaving. But when I tried to start the car, it wouldn't even turn over. The engine was dead. I checked the battery. Nothing. The wires had been cut clean. Someone didn't want me leaving. I spent the rest of the day trying to calm myself, pacing the cabin, checking every lock again and again. By sunset, I was sitting on the couch, staring at the fire. The seventh day was still far away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was getting closer. When the first whisper came that night, I didn't move. "Daniel," it was quieter this time, closer, as if it was standing just outside the wall. And then faintly, from upstairs in the attic, came another voice, my own voice. It whispered, "Don't trust the rules." At first, I thought exhaustion had finally gotten to me. My body stiffened, every nerve locking up as that whisper drifted down from the attic, my own voice, soft, calm, and horribly familiar. Don't trust the rules. The fire in the hearth cracked, spitting tiny sparks into the silence. I stood there, barely breathing, staring at the ceiling as the sound came again, a faint echo of my tone, repeating the same words. Don't trust the rules. It wasn't loud. It didn't sound angry. It was quiet, patient, like someone reminding me of something I should have already known. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave that cabin and never look back, but the car was useless, and the forest outside felt like a living thing, waiting. I tried to tell myself it was a trick, maybe the wind through the wood beams, maybe just my tired mind turning against me. But deep down, I knew better. That voice was me. I took the flashlight again, my hand trembling, and walked slowly toward the attic ladder. The air grew colder the closer I got. It wasn't just the kind of chill that came from drafts. It felt like the temperature itself dropped, sharp enough to bite through my clothes. I stopped at the base of the ladder and looked up. The attic hatch was open. I was sure I had closed it before. "Who's there?" I managed to whisper, though my voice came out weak. Silence. Then a faint sound, the creak of footsteps directly above me. I wanted to turn around, but something pulled me forward. It wasn't curiosity. It was compulsion, like an invisible string tugging at my chest. Slowly, I climbed the ladder, one step at a time. The wood groaned beneath my weight. When my head finally rose above the hatch, I shined the flashlight across the attic. The beam swept over the same old boxes and cobwebs, dust dancing in the light. For a moment, I thought the space was empty again, until the light hit something in the far corner. My own face stared back at me. It was me, standing half in shadow, motionless, pale as wax. The other me tilted its head slightly, just like I did when I was thinking. Its eyes were sunken and its mouth curved into a faint, eerie smile. The flashlight shook in my hand. "What are you?" I whispered. The copy didn't answer at first. It took a slow step forward, its bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Then it said, in my voice, "You shouldn't have come here." I stumbled back a step on the ladder, gripping the sides for balance. "What do you mean?" I asked. It blinked slowly and then said, "The rules don't keep you safe. They keep it safe from you." Before I could respond, the light flickered. The attic dimmed for a moment, the flashlight sputtering. When it came back on, the copy was gone. I scrambled down the ladder and slammed the hatch shut, pushing a chair beneath it. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. The fire had burned low, the shadows growing long and alive across the walls. I grabbed the paper with the rewritten rules from the attic and stared at them again, trying to make sense of what the thing had said. The rules don't keep you safe. They keep it safe from you. What did that mean? As I read over the list, I noticed something that hadn't been there before, faint marks beneath each line, like someone had pressed the pen too hard. I tilted the page under the light and realized they weren't random at all. It was a message, written so faintly it almost blended into the paper. Burn the cabin. I dropped the paper as a sudden noise echoed through the room, a soft thump, like footsteps just outside the front door. I turned off the flashlight and backed away, holding my breath. The doorknob twisted once, slow and deliberate, then stopped. The whisper came next. Not outside this time. Inside. Daniel. It was coming from the wall to my left. The wood vibrated slightly, like something pressing against it from the other side. I stood frozen, my mind screaming to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. Then, with a sound like splintering wood, the wall bulged outward, just for a second, like something had pushed on from inside it, before snapping back into place. I ran. I didn't even know where. My instincts took me to the kitchen, to the only thing I could use as a weapon, a rusty old hatchet hanging above the door. I grabbed it and turned, breathing hard, waiting for the wall to move again. But it didn't. The silence returned, thicker than before. The hours dragged after that. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The rain started again around dawn, steady and cold, the sound almost comforting after everything that had happened. I watched the sky turn pale through the cracks in the shutters, counting each minute until daylight. When the sun finally broke through, I decided to test something. The rules said not to leave the cabin after sunset. But what about the day? I packed a small bag and stepped outside. The air smelled damp and metallic. Mist clung to the trees, and the forest floor squelched under my boots. For the first few minutes, everything felt normal. Birds chirped, the wind moved through the leaves. Then I noticed the footprints again, my own from the day before, but this time they didn't lead to the lake. They led deeper into the woods. I followed them. The trees grew denser, the light dimmer. The sound of water echoed somewhere nearby, though I couldn't see it. After maybe 10 minutes of walking, I reached a small clearing and froze. There was another cabin, identical to mine. Every board, every stone, every mark, the same. Even the sign above the door, Whispering Pines. I stood there, staring in disbelief. The door was open just a crack, swaying gently in the breeze. I stepped closer. Inside, everything was reversed. The furniture was mirrored. The fireplace on the opposite side, the kitchen flipped, even the candle by the window sitting on the left instead of the right. On the table, another note waited. It read, "Welcome back, Daniel. The rules reset when you do." My skin went cold. I turned to run, but something moved in the corner of my eye, a shadow behind the door. It stepped forward. It was me again, the same double from the attic. It smiled, wider this time, teeth too white against its pale skin. "You keep breaking them," it said. "You think you're leaving, but you're only walking in circles." I backed away, stumbling over the threshold. The forest around the cabin seemed to breathe, the mist thickening into tendrils that twisted around my ankles. "Go ahead," it said softly. "Leave again. See where you end up." Then it stepped back into the shadows and vanished. I turned and ran. I didn't care where. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. When I finally stopped, gasping for air, I looked around and felt my stomach drop. There through the trees stood my cabin, not the mirrored one, the same one I had left. The door was open. The fire still burned inside. It was impossible. I stumbled inside, shaking. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, though I didn't remember owning one. The time read 11:47 p.m. Somehow it was night again. My body went numb as I realized the sun had never truly risen. I had been trapped in some kind of loop, the same day, the same forest, repeating over and over. I collapsed onto the chair near the fire, exhaustion washing over me. My eyes felt heavy, my thoughts slow. Just before I drifted into an uneasy half-sleep, I saw movement by the window. The candle was lit again. This time the words carved into the wood beside it had changed. They now read, "Blow it out." And outside, through the fog and trees, my reflection stood watching me from the lake, smiling. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen, staring through the fogged glass at the shape by the lake. My reflection, or what looked like it, stood perfectly still, a dark outline against the shimmer of moonlight on the water. Even through the distance, I could tell something wasn't right. The stance was wrong. The tilt of the head slightly off, like it was studying me. The candle beside the window flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Its flame bent toward the glass as though pulled by some unseen breath, and the carved words beside it, "Blow it out," seemed to pulse in the dim light, the letters dark and raw like fresh wounds in the wood. My first instinct was to obey. I leaned forward, about to blow, but stopped halfway. The last time I'd seen that candle, it had said, "Don't blow it out." The rules kept changing. How could I trust anything now? I hesitated too long. The candle flickered once, twice, and then went out on its own. A chill swept through the cabin. The air grew heavy and cold, pressing down on me. The faint sound of dripping came from somewhere behind the walls, slow and rhythmic, like water seeping through the wood. Outside, the reflection began to move. It didn't walk. It glided across the surface of the lake, the water undisturbed beneath it. The closer it came, the clearer its features became. My heart twisted as I realized it wasn't just copying me anymore. The face was changing, stretching, its grin widening unnaturally, its eyes hollow and black. I stumbled back from the window, knocking the chair over. The candle smoke curled upward like a dark finger, twisting in midair. My reflection stopped at the edge of the trees, close enough now that I could see its mouth move. It was whispering. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel them, vibrating through the floorboards. "Daniel!" The voice came from behind me. I spun around, the room empty. My breath came in short bursts, my chest tightening. Every sound seemed amplified, the ticking of the clock, the groaning of the walls, the faint hiss of wind through the cracks. Then came the knock, 3 sharp, deliberate raps at the door. I froze, my mind screaming not to move. "Daniel," the voice said softly, the same familiar tone it had used before. But this time it didn't sound like my sister. It sounded like me. "Let me in." The door handle twisted slowly, the old metal creaking. I backed away, my heel bumping into the overturned chair. The voice came again, lower now, strained, almost pleading. "You can't stay there forever. You'll freeze." I clenched my fists. "Stay away from me," I whispered. A pause. Then, faintly, "You already let me in." Something banged against the door, hard, once, twice. Then silence. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the entrance, the beam shaking in my trembling hands. The door was still shut, but wet handprints now smeared across the wood, prints that led upward, higher and higher, until they disappeared near the ceiling. I stumbled backward, panic rising in my chest. The walls began to creak and bend, as if the whole cabin were breathing around me. I could feel the heartbeat of the place, slow and heavy, pulsing through the floor. I couldn't stay here another night. I ran to the car again, desperate, even knowing it wouldn't work. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit me like a slap. The air was thick with mist, the trees whispering in the dark. I fumbled for the keys, slipping them into the ignition, twisting hard. The engine roared to life. For the first time since I'd arrived, it actually started. Relief hit me like a wave. I didn't think, didn't look back. I just hit the gas and tore down the gravel path. But the road was wrong. No matter how far I drove, the same trees passed again and again, the same twisted pine leaning over the same crooked rock. The headlights cut through the fog, but it was like driving through a reflection of itself. After what felt like hours, I slammed the brakes and got out, screaming into the empty forest. The echo came back distorted, like something mocking me. When I turned, my heart nearly stopped. The cabin stood there, behind me. I had driven in a perfect circle. The front door was open now, light spilling out onto the dirt path. And there, standing in the doorway, was me. The double smiled and waved. Then it beckoned me closer. I ran the other way. I didn't care where. I just needed to get away. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, and still I kept running. The forest seemed endless, but then, suddenly, I saw movement ahead. A faint, flickering glow. Another cabin. I stopped short, my stomach twisted. The shape, the outline, it was the same again. Another whispering pines. I fell to my knees, laughing and crying all at once. My voice echoed through the trees, sounding strange and broken. The mist rolled closer, curling around me like smoke. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, from behind. I turned. A figure stood there, half hidden by the fog. Its face was a blur, shifting in and out of focus, but its voice was unmistakable. "You broke the circle," it said quietly. My flashlight flickered as I tried to aim it at the figure, but the beam passed right through it. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out. I'm what's left, it said. Every guest who comes here leaves a part of themselves behind. That's the price of breaking the rules. I shook my head. I didn't. I followed them. It tilted its head. You questioned them. The trees around us creaked like something massive shifting in the dark. You saw the reflection, the thing continued. You heard the whispers. You doubted, and doubt is the door. My breath came in sharp bursts. What do you want? The figure smiled faintly. I don't want. It does. Before I could move, the ground beneath me rippled like the surface of water, and a cold hand shot up, grabbing my ankle. I screamed, trying to pull free, but the hand tightened, nails digging into my skin. Another hand emerged, then another, pale and slick like they'd been soaking for years. The figure stepped back into the shadows as the ground opened wider, swallowing me inch by inch. I clawed at the dirt, screaming, but it was no use. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the reflection of my own terrified face staring up from the soil, smiling back at me. When I woke, I was back inside the cabin. Morning light streamed through the windows. The fire was gone, replaced by a faint trail of smoke rising from the ashes. My head pounded, my body sore and covered in dirt. I looked around in a daze, trying to understand what had happened. Then I saw it, a new note lying on the table where the rules had been. Welcome to Whispering Pines, Daniel. Please read and follow the rules carefully. They're for your safety. The same 7 rules were written beneath. Only this time, at the bottom of the page, in a new line of ink, was one final instruction. 8. Do not trust your reflection. It's not you anymore. Outside, through the window, I saw movement by the lake. My reflection stood there again, waving. And this time when I blinked, it didn't disappear. The storm had moved on, but its remnants lingered in the air. Fog, thick and pale, crawling low across the forest floor. Every sound was sharper now, every creak and whisper amplified by the tension inside me. I had spent the entire night locked inside that cabin, listening to the floorboards groan and something drag itself outside my window. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. When dawn finally broke, I hesitated before opening the door. The sunlight looked weak and gray, like it couldn't quite reach through the mist. My heart pounded as I stepped outside. The ground was soaked, the forest glistening with dew. I wanted to check the perimeter to see if whatever had been scratching at my window left any trace. It had. Right beneath the window were marks, deep gouges in the wooden siding, like long fingernails or claws had tried to tear their way in. The wood splintered under my fingertips as I traced the grooves. They were uneven, frantic. Whatever it wasn't human. I followed the marks around the cabin, noticing small footprints pressed into the mud. They were bare. The toes were long, almost unnaturally so, and there were 6 on each foot. They led into the forest, disappearing into the fog. I should have gone back inside. I should have locked the door, packed my things, and waited for daylight to burn through the mist. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when mixed with fear. So I followed them. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds had stopped singing. Every step I took squished against the wet ground, and every few seconds I swore I could hear another step behind me, soft, cautious, mirroring mine. Hello? I called out once, but my voice was swallowed by the fog. I followed the prints until I reached a clearing I hadn't seen before. In the middle stood a large stone circle, half buried by moss and roots. It was old, ancient even. Strange carvings were etched into its surface, worn down but still visible. I didn't recognize the symbols, but they gave me an uneasy feeling, like they were watching. In the center of the stones lay a wooden box. It looked recently placed, too clean for its surroundings. Against my better judgment, I knelt and opened it. Inside was a small bundle of twigs tied with a red string and a tooth. A human tooth. I dropped it immediately and stumbled back. My hands were shaking, my breath uneven. That's when I heard it, the sound of slow, deliberate breathing just behind me. I spun around. Through the fog stood a figure. It was tall, thin, and naked, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and its eyes were where its mouth should have been, a long slit that blinked wetly. I couldn't move. It stood there, just watching me. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like it came from a mouth at all, it said, "You broke the circle." The words echoed through my skull. I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back. I sprinted through the trees, branches slapping my face, roots catching my feet. I could hear it following me, its limbs moving too fast, its breath rasping in and out. I didn't stop until I saw the cabin through the trees. I burst through the door and slammed it shut behind me. My chest was on fire, my lungs screaming. I pressed my ear to the wood and listened. Nothing. For the next few minutes, I stayed perfectly still. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The rule sheet was gone from the table. In its place lay a new one, written in that same jagged handwriting. The first 6 rules were crossed out. Underneath them was a new line, freshly written. Rule 7, do not leave the circle unsealed. You have invited it in. My stomach twisted. I could still smell the forest on my clothes, the moss, the mud, and something else. A faint, metallic scent. Blood. A loud creak came from upstairs. I froze. I hadn't gone upstairs once since I arrived. Slowly I looked toward the staircase. The air around it shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. And then, one by one, I saw pale fingers wrap around the banister. Whatever had followed me from the clearing was in the cabin now. I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. My mind was screaming at me to run, but where could I go? The woods were a maze, the fog too thick. The things breathing grew louder, closer. I snatched my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the stairs, empty. No one there. Then I turned the light toward the wall and saw the words scrawled there in dripping black ink, "Seal it before sunrise." My pulse hammered in my ears. The creature was nowhere to be seen, but I could feel it, watching, waiting. I looked down at my trembling hands, still streaked with mud. There was something caught under my fingernails, red thread, the same kind that had tied the twigs in the box. My brain pieced it together slowly. The circle, the offering, the warning. I had broken something ancient last night, something that was never meant to be disturbed, and now I had until sunrise to fix it, or die trying. I grabbed my jacket, the lantern, and a knife from the kitchen drawer. My reflection in the window looked almost unfamiliar, pale, hollow-eyed, terrified. Then from somewhere deep in the woods I heard the creature's call, a low, mournful wail that echoed like wind through bone. It was waiting for me to come back, and I knew I had to go, because if I didn't seal that circle before sunrise, it would come for me instead. The forest was darker than before, as if it had swallowed the dawn. The fog hung heavy, shifting in slow waves that made everything look alive. I could barely see 5 feet ahead of me, but I knew where I was going, back to the stone circle, the one I'd broken, the one that had let something out. Each step was a battle. My boots sank into the wet earth, and the forest seemed to whisper around me. Every sound, the creak of a branch, the rustle of leaves, made my heart jolt. The woods were awake now, aware of me. It wasn't just the creature that hunted these trees. There was something deeper, something older, moving beneath it all. I kept the lantern raised, my other hand clutching the knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could still hear the creature behind me, its breath, faint but constant. It didn't rush to attack. It was following me, herding me back toward the circle. When I finally reached the clearing, the fog had lifted just enough for me to see the stones again. They looked different now, slick, red, as though they had been bleeding in my absence. The box I'd opened was gone, but the faint impression of it remained. A dark patch burned into the soil. The air was heavy with a smell I can only describe as rot mixed with iron. My stomach churned. The circle's carvings glowed faintly, pulsing in a rhythm that almost matched my heartbeat. I dropped to my knees and stared at it. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what seal it before sunrise meant. But I had one clue, the red thread. I reached into my pocket and pulled it out, the same frayed string that had somehow wrapped around my fingers the night before. It felt alive in my hand, almost warm. I didn't understand why, but I knew what to do. Instinct guided me now, not reason. I placed the thread around the center of the circle, tying it into a closed loop. My hands shook violently, and every time I tried to knot it, the earth seemed to tremble beneath me. That's when I heard it again, the voice. You cannot unmake what was released. It was coming from behind me. I turned slowly, and there it was, the thing from the fog. It stood at the edge of the circle, taller than before, its bones cracking and stretching beneath its pale skin. Its eyes, or where its eyes should have been, were black pits now, leaking a dark, oily liquid. Its arms dangled too long, its fingers grazing the ground. "You broke the seventh seal," it hissed. "You offered yourself." My throat tightened. "I didn't mean to. You entered the woods. You took what was not yours. You drew breath where silence was meant to reign." Its voice shook the trees. The fog thickened, swirling around the stones like smoke. The creature stepped closer, but the moment its foot touched the circle's edge, it recoiled, shrieking as if burned. The thread pulsed brighter. I understood then. The circle wasn't meant to keep something out. It was meant to keep it in. And by breaking it, I'd freed this thing, this guardian, this prisoner. "I can fix it," I said hoarsely, clutching the thread. "I'll seal it again." The creature laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "You cannot seal it with fear. You must feed it what it was promised." "What does that mean?" I whispered. It extended its hand toward me, its long fingers curling slowly. "A life for a life." The wind howled, whipping through the clearing. My lantern flickered, shadows twisting across the stones. My mind raced. If I didn't do this, if I didn't seal it, the thing would roam free. Maybe it already was. Maybe the forest itself was part of it. I thought of the old rule sheet, the writing that had changed overnight. The final line. "You have invited it in." It wasn't talking about the creature. It was talking about me. The realization hit like ice in my veins. The rules had never been about survival. They were about transformation. Whoever broke them became the next keeper of the curse. I looked down at the circle. The thread glowed red hot now, melting into the ground. My vision blurred as a ringing filled my ears. My blood felt heavier, thicker, drawn toward the soil beneath me. The creature took another step forward, but now it wasn't smiling. It bowed its head. "Seal it, keeper," it said softly. Something inside me broke open, or maybe awakened. I pressed my hands to the dirt, tracing the carvings with my fingertips. The symbols pulsed in response, burning into my skin. I screamed as light burst from the cracks between the stones, white and searing. The forest roared. The ground split open. The air was filled with voices, hundreds of them, whispering, crying, chanting. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, the creature was gone. The stones were whole again. The fog had lifted completely. For the first time in days, sunlight touched the clearing. I stood up slowly, my body trembling. My hands were covered in blood, but it wasn't mine. The knife lay at my feet, slick and glinting in the light. The thread was gone. I stumbled back toward the cabin, every step heavier than the last. By the time I reached it, the place looked different, older, dustier, like no one had lived there for years. The furniture was covered in cobwebs, the rule sheet yellowed with age. I picked it up, barely able to read the faded ink. The 7 rules were still there, but one line had changed. Rule 7. If you break the seal, the forest chooses a new keeper. My reflection in the window stopped me cold. My eyes, they weren't mine anymore. They were dark, hollow, and endless, the same as the creature's. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. The whispering had returned, faint but familiar. Someone new would come to the cabin someday. Maybe for a weekend trip, maybe to escape the noise of the world. They'd find the rule sheet, the firewood, the peace of isolation. And if they broke the circle, I'd be waiting for them. The end. Thanks for watching and for making it all the way through this eerie tale. If you like the story, don't forget to tap that like button. It helps keep the lights on in this cabin. Go ahead and subscribe too, if you're brave enough to hear what comes next. And hey, leave a comment below. Tell me which rule creeped you out the most. Just be careful what you write. Some words have a way of summoning attention. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your lanterns lit, and never break the rules. See you in the next story, if you make it back.